episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
And also by the Mama Nurture Prenatal Yoga School. Learn to teach fertility yoga, prenatal, postnatal, and baby and me yoga with confidence. To find out more about our online or in-person trainings, visit mamanurture.ca. And don't forget, we spell mama, M-A-M-A. So that's mamanurture.ca. Welcome to episode 138 of the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mom of three, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. And this podcast was created for you. Overall, this podcast was created for you, and specifically today's episode. And this is so that you can connect to information and inspiration every single week and feel supported. Because I get it. I remember what it was like to leave a teacher training and feel like I was leaving this supportive community, leaving the constant feed of inspiration and information. Today's episode is really special to me. Listening back through this audio, it's one of those episodes that is just soothing to me as a yoga teacher. The topic of making yoga accessible to everyone is something that we've talked about before. In episode 92 with Elliot, formerly Kessie, Chantel, and Katie, we spoke about using accessible language in our classes. And in episode 60, I spoke with Sarah Helt from the Accessible Yoga Organization about making yoga accessible to people with different abilities. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to have the founder and director of Accessible Yoga himself, Jivana Heyman, on the show to talk about how we can make yoga more accessible on the level of individual classes, trainings, and way beyond where I thought this conversation was going to go. We also talk about his new book and how it's being released in November. It's called Accessible Yoga Poses and Practices for Every Body. Jivana sent me an advance copy of this book, and I am so excited that it is out there. You're going to love this book. I was excited to browse through, see some great photos, see some amazing information, and I can't wait to hear from our Connected Yoga Teacher community about this book. If you are looking for a link or a note from today's episode or the clickable timestamps, go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/138. Everything is there for you. Speaking of show notes, thank you, Laura Eliza, for noticing. Laura left us a review and she said, "Thank you, Shannon, for the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I listen to all of your episodes and learn something every single time. Sometimes there's so much information I have to re-listen more than once. I love how the show notes are so complete. Being able to go back to links from time to time is super helpful. I enjoy your honesty and your gentle manner. I feel this podcast and the associated Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook community is inclusive and supportive. It is another place where I learn so much and I'm able to share and hopefully teach others some of what I know. So thanks again and carry on. Namaste, Laura." Thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time to leave this review. This makes my heart happy when you are feeling like there's information where you even want to go back and re-listen and that you feel like the show notes are there and supporting you. It is because of our amazing team at the Connected Yoga Teacher that our show notes and the audio and the customer relationship is so amazing. So huge shout out of thanks at the top of our episode today to Suzanne, Crunch, and Cindy. I am always grateful when I see each one of these people helping and pitching in and being part of the community. Another really important part of our community is Schedulicity, our podcast sponsor, and also the scheduling software that I have known, loved, trusted, and used since 2011. So let's hear from Schedulicity.
Hey Connected Yoga Teachers, this is Shayna with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Schedulicity and Instagram work together in perfect harmony for your yoga business. You can connect your Instagram account with your Schedulicity business listing and automatically filter your images using a hashtag specific to your business. You can also connect your Schedulicity account with your Instagram business account to add a book button to your Instagram profile and posts. Catch the whims of your Instagram followers when they're the most inspired by your social media content. For more information, visit essentials.schedulicity.com or inquire at support@schedulicity.com. We'd love to help you get the most out of your online accounts.
Okay, connected yoga teachers, let's dive in and meet Jivana. As I mentioned before, Jivana is the founder and director of Accessible Yoga, which is an international nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing access to the yoga teachings. Over 10 years ago, Jivana coined the term accessible yoga, and since then, will you tell me, connected yoga teachers, I feel like I see this phrase everywhere, and I love that Jivana and I got to talk in today's episode about what that really means. The Accessible Yoga organization was created to support education, training, and advocacy with the mission of shifting the public perception of yoga. As a yoga teacher, Jivana has specialized in teaching yoga to people with disabilities with an emphasis on community building and social engagement. Jivana has been leading countless yoga teacher training programs around the world over the past 25 years. He is a cheerleader of yoga teachers. He really believes in the work that they are all doing and that yoga teachers are doing the best they can with what they know. Let's meet Jivana. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Jivana. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
I am super excited because we got to meet in person at the Accessible Yoga Conference when you came to Toronto. And then again, when I flew to California, and I feel like I don't travel that much.
I know, and I've seen you twice.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today about accessible yoga and the big news about your book.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk with you about it.
Tell our listeners who maybe haven't met you, don't know your work, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
So I've been sharing yoga with people with disabilities for a long time, about 25 years. And my background was in AIDS activism because I'm a gay man. And when I came out in the 80s, AIDS was just decimating my community. And so I'd been practicing yoga myself, but then immediately upon teaching, I wanted to bring yoga to my community. And I think my activism is still there in a sense that I'm really interested in disability awareness and disability rights. And so Accessible Yoga, the organization, our nonprofit, really grew out of that, my desire to kind of disrupt the yoga, what do we call it? Yoga world, I guess you would say, and what I saw with the commercialization of yoga, and to share yoga with people who don't normally feel comfortable in a traditional yoga setting or don't have access to the practices for a variety of reasons, not just disability, but for any reason, because they don't feel like they look like they fit in or because they can't afford to go to class, whatever the reason is, to try to bring more people into the practice and share it widely.
That's amazing. I really felt this when I went to the Accessible Yoga Conference. I felt like there were so many details taken care of to make people feel welcome. So thank you for doing that. And you said the word disrupt the yoga world. And I'd love to dig into what are some of the things that you see now that you feel make, like, I know that your message is to make yoga accessible. So what are some of the things right now that you see that feel like yoga doesn't look accessible to all people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. Yeah, that's what I think about all the time. I mean, I feel like, well, let me start on the positive side. I'll just say that to me, yoga is just so incredible. Like, it's basically saved my life, and I feel just so indebted to the practice and to my teachers, and just so lucky that I have yoga in my life. And I feel a kind of a burden to share that with others. That I feel like being gay is a big part of my story, because I feel like I was always kind of outside of the mainstream, and it kind of gave me a perspective that I could question things more. Like I didn't quite understand, what was happening and why, and just some things that I think people assume in society, especially in the West. And yoga just offered me this completely different perspective that just was such a relief and so heartwarming, to find spiritual practice that I could connect with that didn't feel oppressive. Um, yeah, I mean, so that's really the core of it for me, is just wanting to share that and to really look at the systems that we've created in yoga and why they're not working. I mean, some are working, and there's amazing work being done. In fact, I would just say that again to be positive, that really, I feel the work of accessible yoga is to highlight the incredible work that's out there, and not really creating something new. I don't think that accessible yoga. First of all, it's not like a style of yoga. I'm not trying to create a new school of yoga. You know what I mean? It's not. It's not that. I'm just trying to highlight the amazing people doing incredible work, and also question what's happening. Yeah.
Oh, that is key. I love that you want to highlight the people that are doing the amazing work. And that's what I see your organization doing. Like, look at this teacher sharing yoga in this way. Look at this person doing yoga in this way.
Hmm.
So thank you for bringing
Yeah.
it into the positive for sure.
Well, and you actually, I feel a connection with you in that way too, because I see your work, connecting yoga teachers, and I feel like that's a big piece of our work too. Really trying to create new connections and community where there really hasn't been one. I mean, our conferences came out of my personal like kind of struggle when I moved away from San Francisco after living there for like 30 years, and I felt really lonely and isolated, and like I didn't want to have to like market myself and sell myself as a teacher, which seemed like the way it had to be done.
Yeah.
And I tried to turn it around and like think, how can I create a platform for people who I admire? How can I create a community that I want to be a part of? So that's what we did. And I see you doing that same thing too. I don't know if that's true, but it feels like you're really creating something that you wanted.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
true?
It's true. It's like, I need this. I live in an isolated place. Like, there are lots of yoga teachers around me, really, but we're all doing our own thing and we're busy. And there are times where our roads all get closed and we can't drive anywhere in the winter. So it can be really isolating. Just coming back to when you said for your own story that yoga impacted you in a way that saved your life. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I just, when I was younger, I lost so many people. I mean, my best friend died of AIDS in 1995, and I was really young. Not that young, but I was young, and I wasn't really prepared to be dealing with the amount of death and illness that I was surrounded by. I mean, and not only did he die, but then I had 5 other close friends die within, probably 3 years.
Wow.
And it was a time that's hard to describe now, and I think it was horrible, but also incredibly moving, and I learned so much from my friends as they went through that process of illness and death, and I feel incredibly grateful to them. And yoga to me became kind of a tool to explore these issues of illness and death, and just humanity in general. I mean, to me, yoga offers answers to like the burning questions of life, like who am I and why am I here and what am I doing, and things that I just couldn't figure out on my own. And I really am so grateful again that yoga gave me those. It kind of gave me like an anchor when I felt so lost, and I feel so grateful to that for that. And I feel really like that's something I want to share with others. I want people to know that yoga offers that. It's such a different perspective than we learn in the West. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. It isn't the easiest thing to articulate. What I do hear from your story is that there was an incredible amount of suffering. Yoga was the thing that really helped you along the way. And now you feel this, um, well, you said burden. You feel this, it's interesting because that it seems like such a good word. I don't know of another word. Like an
Yes.
obligation, a burden,
Oh, yeah.
this I need to share this now with other
Yeah.
people.
It is an obligation I have.
Yeah, and you've created this amazing thing. You've done all of this work, your own work, your own working through, like, what yoga can offer you, but also how you can bring yoga to all kinds of populations, up to the point where you just published a new book, is that right? Is it out yet?
Well, it's released in November, and I'm really excited about it. It's basically just like a pathway, another pathway into yoga for people. I mean, most of the work of accessible yoga has been, through the conferences, like you mentioned, and also online. We have like a really strong online presence we have 25 Facebook groups in 10 different languages.
Wow.
And, then we have trainings all over the world. This year we have over 35 trainings. So, I mean, mostly it's been in person, but the book is kind of just like another avenue for teaching and sharing. And I really tried to create something that was very simple and accessible, and not assuming anything. You know what I mean? Like, I tried to start from the beginning and create a book really for new students, and especially for people who felt that they couldn't do yoga, or yoga is not for them. So mostly it's about how to start, how to get into the practice, how to explore it in a different way. And a lot of chair yoga, yoga in bed, yoga, using a lot of props and support. Just trying to make it accessible. I keep using that word, but
It's I love how you said you didn't assume anything. So I was talking with
mhm,
someone the other day, and I bump into a lot of people who know yoga really well. And
mm,
so I'm always curious when I can talk to someone who's never done yoga.
yeah,
And he said to me, "Oh, if I would like to do yoga, but I would have to do an introduction class or an
yeah,
introduction course, or I'd have to book an introduction so that I would know what I was doing."
hmm,
And I think, "Oh my goodness." I mean, I feel this way about going to the gym. I don't go to the gym, it's scary to me. I feel like I would need someone to help me.
hmm,
And I think when we are so connected to our yoga practice, we can forget how scary it might be to someone.
yeah, yeah. And I was, simultaneously trying to share my story, and also some kind of philosophy and more of the subtle practice of yoga too. So I think what's great about a book, I mean, I also encourage people to go to a beginner's class if they can. That I think that's a really great way to start. But in a book, there was kind of this chance to look at a little more, I don't know, like a little more again of that story and the underlying philosophy. Like when I said earlier, about how yoga is so different than our Western thinking. I think it's hard to explain that, and like you said too, it's hard to describe that clearly. And I really tried to address that in the book, like very simply. Um, what is yoga philosophy? How can we make this part accessible too? How can we access these teachings in a way that is respectful to their history and the tradition of yoga, but make them very useful and effective and applicable in our lives? So there's a little bit of that. So it's asana, but then there's a lot of other little stuff in there.
This
Yeah.
is amazing. I can think of a lot of students that I work with one on one who would really benefit from a book like that, because oftentimes they'll start doing yoga, they'll start to learn like what that experience is like, and then they have more questions about the philosophy behind it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I looked at other yoga books, and there was a lot of how to, kind of like yoga for dummies type stuff. So I think
Mm,
that already exists, like yoga basics.
mhm.
But I just wanted to give another level of it, which to me, and again, kind of the heart of my work is not really asana, but actually the whole of yoga. And really thinking differently. And I think that's what yoga can offer us, a different perspective. And that's where I think that's the piece that I'm constantly struggling to make accessible. Is not, yeah, like not, because like I think people have a misconception about accessible yoga again, and it's like yoga adapted for people with disabilities. And that's not really what I think of my work as. Like, if it's not what I'm interested in. I mean, I am actually interested in that, but I'm really interested in like making the deepest, most esoteric parts of yoga accessible to everyone.
Can you give me an example of that, of how you feel like sometimes you think that it wouldn't feel that accessible to someone, and how your work, because I get what you're saying. I would love an
Yeah.
example if you can think
Well,
of.
I mean, to me, the most simple example is just that yoga, if you look at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and, the Bhagavad Gita, you see that yoga is about working with your mind, and that the body is, a useful vehicle, and it can be a part of a practice. Asana is important, but it's just one of the 8 limbs. And the other limbs are basically ignored in contemporary Western practice. And so I feel like it's an important part of this work to me, because interestingly, the other limbs are actually more accessible. You know what I'm saying? Like, we all have minds.
Right.
We all are working with our minds all the time, and we're all looking at how to live, a happy life, like something everyone is struggling with, and everyone can gain access or gain benefit from teachings about how to do that. And that's what yoga does so beautifully. Like, yama niyama, like, offers us guidance to live in the world. How do you live in the world in a peaceful way? That's what I think yama niyama are teaching us. How to be fulfilled, how to be how to deal with the struggles and the pain that we face all the time, and how to use the body, but also the breath and the senses, how to work on quieting the mind and focus and meditation. These things are pretty accessible, actually, right? You don't need to be able to do any intense physical practice.
Right. And I love that you're bringing this in, because oftentimes when I think of accessible yoga and the work that you do, it's so much easier to visually show that work if, say, you show a yoga student or teacher in a wheelchair, right? Because then your brain is saying, oh, anyone can do yoga. And these things that you're talking about, the rest of the 8 limbs, are hard to show. Is there a way that you go through them in your book? Do you want to walk us through what that kind of looks like to make them accessible?
Well, in the book, it's really just the beginning of that conversation. I just tried to expose people to those concepts in general. I'm trying not to lecture them about the 8 limbs per se, but rather offer kind of a glimpse. Here's yoga philosophy. Here's a way to look at it in more accessible fashion. Here's ways to practice, to do breathing practices, to do relaxation, to do meditation. So I try to approach it in a way where I don't assume people know anything or need to know anything to practice those things. So I don't really go into it in great detail. Maybe in the next book. I'm kind of thinking, I'm serious, but I kind of have this dream about another book that will be even more philosophy. But this was just an introduction to the whole thing. And I just like to clarify that, because it is true that I am interested in changing the perspective and the perception of who can practice. So showing people who practice using wheelchairs, I think, is essential. And I love to do that too. And I like to talk about that in the book. But I feel like there's true accessibility means you get to the root of the thing and you make that accessible, right? You can begin to reveal the heart of yoga and share that with people, whether they have a disability or not.
Do you have a way that are there some kinds of messages that you're trying to get through to teachers over and over again about thinking about their own classes or workshops or trainings, anything from the way we market our yoga to the way we put a class together or cue our students? What are some of the key things that you think we could be looking at?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and I read a lot about this topic and I read a lot of interviews. I feel like yoga teachers are so often criticized, and kind of discredited. I don't know. I feel like we get such a bad rap, and I don't want to add to that. Like I can talk about some ideas I have, but I just want to start by saying that I really admire and support yoga teachers, and that's really my mission. Is I feel really passionate about lifting up yoga teachers who are really trying to do something really beautiful and share these practices with people to the best of their ability. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, even if I were to go back to my classes and
Uh-huh.
attend my own classes when I was a new yoga teacher, I had no idea. And I was saying things and doing things and making posters that I would not do now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say that I think people are doing the best they can with what they have. And I really
Right.
appreciate that. I just want to say that. I really appreciate that. And I think that yoga teachers need support and they need positive, enthusiastic support, which is like what you do. Again, I feel like I really appreciate your work and I feel like that's what we need to do. We need to come together in a positive way to support each other instead of criticizing each other all the time and tearing each other down. I think we can be cheerleaders and really lift each other up and learn as we go. I continue to make mistakes all the time. And I think, thank God, people are there to tell me in a nice way when I have, without making me feel embarrassed or less than, or stupid.
Right.
So,
That's the definition of a really supportive friend. When they're like, have you given, I feel like my kids do that to me all the time.
which side? The not
Maybe not
supportive
this,
way?
not so gentle, but
Yeah.
they are doing it out of like, "Oh my gosh, have you thought about it this way?" Like, yeah.
I guess I've been thinking a lot about the relationship between yoga therapy and accessible yoga too. And I think it's easy for yoga therapists to say like, oh, look, yoga teachers should do more, they should do better. Because, yoga therapist has tons of training and maybe 1,000 hours of training. And not everyone can afford that or has the time or energy for that. And I feel like those of us who have less training, we can still be great teachers. So I just want to highlight that I think most people I know who are yoga teachers are really amazing and doing the best they can. But I think, yeah, we can all learn more and do better. So should I give some ideas?
Yeah, I would love it if you give some ideas.
I mean, it's kind of what the training is about. There's so many ideas that I have, but I'll focus on a few things that we talk about in the training. And that has to do with two main words that I repeat during the training, and that's creativity and collaboration. And I think that a lot of yoga teachers are trained to kind of repeat what they've been told and almost in a very routine way. And I think their teaching can become, kind of routine. You know what I mean, right? Like we might teach the
Oh,
same sequence in
yes.
the same way. Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
benefit in that, actually. There's benefit in repeating something. It can be trauma informed for the student to know what's coming next, right? So I'm not saying that's wrong, but what I think we need to do is to bring in a little creativity. And I think to me, creativity is a huge part of my life. I mean, my background is in art, and I really think a lot about the relationship between creativity and yoga and spirituality. And to me, it just means being open to new experiences and spontaneity and intuition, And so I feel like as a teacher, after I get comfortable teaching, maybe for a year or two, or who knows how long it might take me, 10 years, I don't know, then I can start to use my creative instincts and think of other ways for people to experience the benefits of the practices that I'm sharing with them. Does that make sense?
It does. And I like how you said once you feel comfortable, because we do really lean on that when we're leaving teacher training. We lean on, maybe a flow or this favorite way of putting something together, like someone else's idea of teaching yoga. I'm thinking back to my original training was Kundalini yoga. So it was like, you will teach
Yeah.
these kriyas in this way, and then you'll eventually learn how to find different variations for students.
So actually, in
But
my book, I talk about this. I use the example of art and how the great gurus, who created all these lineages, were like the great masters of painting. And to me, like I have a background in painting, and I used to think about, do I want to paint like so and so? Like, say I love Van Gogh. Like, can I copy Van Gogh to learn how to paint? And in a way, you can actually. Like, you can learn to paint by copying great masters. I mean, that's an amazing way to study. But eventually, to be an artist, you have to paint your own way.
Oh, I love that analogy. Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. Yeah, paint by number is what we sometimes have to
Yeah,
start.
yeah, but it's a good way to start, and I appreciate it. And again, there's benefit in routine. So I'm not saying to let go of that routine. In fact, art works best when there's structure. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you need a
Mhm.
structure. And I feel like we have that if you have a tradition. My lineage, my teacher, Swami Satchidananda, had a very systematic way of teaching, and it was brilliant. And the way I teach now is still based in that as structure, but I'm not defined by that anymore. I feel like I need to bring my own creativity to that experience because I've taught a lot and I've seen a lot of students and I've seen different ways now to share the teachings, right? But I still base it on what I've learned from my teachers. So
Right.
it's that balance, I think, of, again, respect and tradition, but also creativity that's not for its own sake, but because it's actually more effective. So that's the other thing I'd say. It's like, you don't need to throw away tradition just because you want to brand something new, and make money. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you do it only because you want to make your classes more effective and accessible.
Yeah. Well, it's so true. I remember like planning out this whole flow as a new teacher, and then all of a sudden someone came in with a shoulder injury. And I thought,
Exactly.
this is going to throw my whole class off.
Exactly.
So you learn how to be creative on the fly, and sometimes it's really rocky.
But that actually is, to me, that is the essence of teaching yoga, is actually what happens when a teacher who has a certain amount of experience all of a sudden is faced with this kind of question, challenge. Here is something new for you to look at. Now, how do you teach this flow with someone who can't use that right shoulder? And that's, to me, the really beautiful and fun and exciting part of yoga.
Mhm.
To really be able to explore that rather than avoiding it. I actually jump into that because that's to me like the good part now.
Yeah. This is why we do this one thing in our prenatal yoga teacher training. We take a traditional sun salutation, and then we're like, okay, now you have someone who's 3 months pregnant and they
Yes,
still want to do a sun salutation. Now what?
exactly.
Yeah. I know you do the
We do
same.
the same. Yeah, we do the same. We do like, okay, now practice on the floor, or practice in a chair, or practice at the wall, or practice here. We use different formats, like in bed. Can you do a sun salutation in bed? What does that look like?
Ooh. Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Oh, that's fascinating. The reason why I say I know that you do this is because I've shared a few videos that you have of like a sun
Mm-hmm.
salutation on the wall. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those are great. So you said creativity, but you also said collaboration. I'm
Yes.
so curious to hear about this.
Well, I mean, collaboration is about collaborating with your students. That I think that part of to me, one of the most limiting factors in most yoga classes is the hierarchy that we create in the room. And that's a hierarchy that to me is based on a lot of kind of systems of oppression that we've all been trained in. And I mean, maybe that's a big statement, but I mean, I think that it's important to question that hierarchy.
I think so. And
Yeah.
also, our students sometimes are requesting it. They're like, "Aren't you going to tell me? Like, which muscle am I feeling this in?" I'm like, "I'm not sure. Which muscle are you feeling it in?" They're like frustrated with me. They want me to be the all-knowing. I'm like, I don't know what's going on in your body.
Yes, and exactly. And okay, so many times students want you to be the one with the knowledge, and they see themselves as the one as not having knowledge, not having wisdom, not having information. And that's not what yoga teaches, actually.
Right.
If you look at the yoga system, one of the concepts in yoga is about the koshas, the layers of being, and
Mhm.
the Vijnana Maya kosha is actually the intuitive body. It's like within our bodies, we have intuitive wisdom. And my teacher said that all knowledge is there within each of us. And so I think of that often with my students, to think that in each of them lies all knowledge. And my job as a teacher, again, is to teach them, I guess, to a point, but actually to help them connect to that knowledge, right? My job really is to inspire them to explore that inner journey, to find the truth within themselves, rather than to rely on me as an external, like force.
Right. This is amazing. And there are so many layers to this. Like, even I can think of different teacher trainings where it's almost like we were taught, fake it till you make it, or walk out there with confidence, or,
Mhm.
Kind of this idea, like, look like you know what you're doing, which
Yeah.
is it's an aspect of holding space, I guess, that it is necessary when you're
Mhm.
holding space for a class, but
Yeah.
it can tip over pretty easy. I don't know if it's ego or if it's just, like you said, it's
You,
society and
well,
how we've been raised.
I think of my new favorite word is dialectic, the dialectic, when there's two opposing ideas that are both true.
Yeah.
And I feel like that to me summarizes yoga, because yoga is generally a physical practice that's actually about spirit. And to me, there's already a dialectic there, right? You're using the body, breath, mind to go beyond it altogether. And both are true.
Right.
Both of those worlds are true. There's a spiritual level that's happening at the same time as this physical, very earthly experience. That is also true. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I am here, like right now, I'm having a physical experience in my body, but I know, according to yoga and my own experience, that there's another part of me. There's like another layer and another level of my experience that is unaffected by what's happening on the physical level. And I would say within a yoga class, the same thing is happening, that sure, the teachers in the front, they need to hold the space. They have to have knowledge. They have to have wisdom. They have all that. But at the same time, the students also need to be acknowledged for their intuitive understanding of themselves that they may not have access to at this moment, but it's there. Right. So you have to hold that yourself. You hold that opposite, or the two opposing ideas, that you have knowledge, but they also have knowledge, and
Right.
that both are
Oh, that's
true. Both are true.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I like how you said hold that even if they haven't figured it out yet, sort of like if it doesn't seem apparent that they have. Like, I'm thinking of students who come in and they just are living busy lives. This is me as a student as well. And and you carve out this space for them,
Yes.
and then you just wait. And
Yes.
sometimes you have to wait class after
Oh,
class.
I know. It can be so. I'm not a patient person, and that's the hardest thing for me. That's the hardest. That was the hardest lesson for me to learn as a teacher. Really, I wanted
Right.
to. I wanted to tell people what they should do, and I wanted to give them the information that they needed. And I really had to let that go. I really had to let that go
Right.
and trust them. I trust you will find your way. I know that you can do it. Here's yoga. Like, here it is. Here's this practice. Use it or not. Like, it's up to you. There's a great sloka in the Gita. I mean, I can find it in the Bhagavad Gita about that, about how the wise person doesn't try to change the mind of the unwise person, but just guides them through their, by example. So you just guide by example. So
Right.
being patient to me was like a real lesson, and trying to just trust that everyone had their own time. They would find their way eventually. And I had to just practice myself. I had to be a yogi. That's the best thing I can do. Right. For my
Oh, that's
students. Yeah.
brilliant. I'm just thinking of parenting. That's really all
I know.
you do. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My kids taught me. They're teaching me that every day.
Yeah. That's all you can do is do your own practice. I used to think it was super selfish to do
Uh-huh.
my own practice, but you're right, it isn't. You're serving a lot more people when you do your own practice.
Oh yeah. That is, doing your practice is the least selfish thing you can do. Actually,
Mhm.
taking care of
Yeah.
ourselves is the most serviceful thing we can do for the world. I mean, there's nothing better. If you take care of yourself, if you can become connected and with your truth and peaceful, then you're affecting the world in a beautiful way. I mean, and I'm an activist, so it's hard for me to say that. You know what I mean? Like I'm one who's been on the streets marching, getting arrested, and doing all that stuff, and I would do it again. But I still know in my heart that the best thing I can do for the world is turn inside and trying to find some peace with myself, and then live according to that. Right?
Right. You have done so much. Like, I have not known you for that long. For you to organize all of this, how many years have you been doing this with the Accessible Yoga organization and the trainings?
Well, I think it was probably 2007 that I started the first thing with the name Accessible Yoga. It was actually, what happened is I was leading 200-hour teacher trainings, like, as my job. That was like, well, like my main income was leading 200-hour trainings. So like I've trained 1 million yoga teachers. So it's kind of my fault, you know, I could say. There's so many. But that was what I was just churning them out, you know, but I love it. I love teacher training. It's such an amazing experience. Anyway, but I was also teaching yoga for people with different disabilities. You know, I would go into local hospitals and community centers, and I was doing that a lot. But I noticed that the students in my classes, the students with disabilities that were coming for a long time, didn't feel like they could go to the teacher trainings because they weren't accessible. And I really struggled with I had a few long-term students, and I was like, okay, you need to be a teacher now. Like, you've been doing this for years. And they're like, oh no, I can't take that training. It's either the schedule is not right, or I can't be in that space, or it's too intensive, or I don't see myself as a teacher. And that was where the idea of accessible yoga came from, just wanting to make yoga teacher training accessible. So we started in 2007 with a 200-hour teacher training that was designed for people with disabilities to become yoga teachers themselves.
So then, did you ever think, I have this big vision? Like, back then, did you feel like there was this big vision, and did that feel possible? Because I work with a lot of yoga teachers, and we have listeners that have like this big vision, and they think, well, how will that ever happen?
That is such a good question.
Do you know, like, was there this where you saw what this could be, or is it just, it has evolved along the way?
I would say it's back to the dialectic for me with both things. That in my heart, I've always known, I have a vision of yoga that is clear to me and completely accessible. And I have a way of seeing it and talking about it that I feel very strongly about. And I feel like that's been with me for forever, or at least since I actually learned about yoga from my grandmother when I was a child. So for me, yoga has been like in my life since I can't remember. She practiced every day. She was like a really early hippie. She was amazing.
Wow.
And she lived with us a lot, and I would just watch her every morning practice, and she would teach me, and it was amazing. So yoga has always been a part of my life, and I feel like I always had this vision of it as more than what I saw. But I never imagined, I never really imagined this particular thing. Like, you know what I'm saying? I didn't conceive of this organization or any of that stuff ahead of time. That just kind of, I don't know, kind of revealed itself.
Right.
Just
because the reason why I want to ask is because it looks right now, I've been watching just in the last couple of years, and it looks like you're getting ready to launch this book. Like, you've worked on this book, you have this organization. And so from the outside, it might look like you have this, you had this clear vision, and like, off you went, and look at you. Do you know what I mean? People don't really see what it was really like.
Yeah. I like that's what it is. I think I had a clear vision. I've always had a clear vision of what yoga is to me, and that
Mhm.
hasn't changed. And the practical pieces hadn't really fallen into place before now. I'm still not sure what's
Right.
happening. It feels it feels confusing. And also, what's so interesting about it, I would say, is that yoga, I mean, probably it's true of any work, that it becomes kind of insular. It's like within the yoga world, and what does that really mean? Like, what is the yoga world? And what is our relationship to the rest of the world? So I feel like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, I feel like right now, I definitely feel like accessible yoga is having an impact within the yoga world, but that's actually a tiny little community, right? Of like really dedicated teachers, the people that we know, I think, that we both communicate and connect with all the time. It's pretty small. But like, what's the impact on the rest of the world? And to me, accessible yoga is actually that. It's like, I want to share yoga with people who don't do it, don't think they can do it.
Right.
And I want to
Right.
share the heart of yoga with them, not just the physical part.
That's amazing. So getting into a really nitty-gritty detail here, I see your social media lately, and I'm like, you're doing something different.
Hmm. Yes,
Are you?
I am. I've hired someone to do it for me.
I
That's what I've done
love it.
different.
I love it. I love it.
That's great that you noticed. Yeah, I just decided that, well, social media is, so interesting, because I find it just, sucks my time and energy, and I love connecting that way. And it's been so great for accessible yoga, but I also feel like I was doing it as work kind of. And so that was always my excuse to get online. And so I'm trying to create more space in my life. And also I just I needed more professional help. So I'm so excited. Kelly is now doing our social media, and my personal, she's me, like online. Like, I'm not even speaking as me, which is amazing. She basically, what we're doing is, I've written a lot, and she'll just quote me, and she'll just use my quotes and put it on there for me. So
Well,
it
what
is
I
me,
love is
actually. But
I see it is you. Like, I can tell. It is definitely your personality, and it's more story. Like, it's more of
mhm,
it's working. It's working. It definitely got my attention, and I thought right away, I think you either have, like, just sat down and said, "Okay, we're gonna dig into this strategy," or you hired someone,
yeah.
and I think it's brilliant to make space. So many yoga teachers say, "This isn't my thing. I don't wanna
Mhm.
be online more. I want to be teaching more." And so this clears space for
Well,
that.
and the other part of it, because I was just talking to another yoga teacher about this. Having survived as a full-time yoga teacher for like 25 years or more now, actually it's more. I mean, I know the struggle, like, financially, and I feel like and I can just speak for myself, that I always go to this place of lack. It's just so hard to, like, to make a living teaching yoga, and it's incredibly frustrating to me that it's so hard. And it's something that I'm really starting to shift my attention to with accessible yoga, is that. So how can we make yoga teaching more sustainable financially? But what happens from that place of lack is, I tend to feel like I can't hire people. I don't know the money for it, and like, even if I'm making pretty good money, I still have this tendency to want to just hoard. And I think that's not healthy. And that to grow something, you need to invest in it. And that's what I'm trying to do. And so, plus, I mean, the nonprofit is completely separate from me. I don't own it. I run it, but it's like, I have a ton of staff there already. But hiring someone to help me personally with my social media was like a huge leap for me in terms of my
Right.
own personal growth. So I think part of the lack with yoga teachers is totally understandable. And it's hard to invest in ourselves, you know?
Mm. It's so interesting. We just had a guest on. The episode isn't out yet, but it will be soon, and she was saying, like, which we know this, your thoughts determine your emotions. Like, our we are setting we're creating it. Like, when you're saying, like,
Mm.
there's this overall, yoga teachers aren't known for having, like, sustainable, strong business sense. That's
Yeah.
not our
Yeah.
and so I love that you're bringing this into your own practice and your own, like, this is part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think accessibility often starts with finances, actually.
That's
And
brilliant.
well,
Can you
doesn't
tell
it?
me more about why you think that?
Well, because, first of all, money is a huge part of all of our lives
Oh, I
and
see
our
what you're
ability
saying. You're
to,
saying
but I mean,
like to
yeah, I
right.
mean, a couple of different ways. One is that for people to access yoga, they need to have the money to get it. Like you have to have money to go to yoga classes for students, I mean,
Right.
or to buy a book or whatever. But I mean, also I think for yoga teachers, it's kind of at the core of it too. It's just like, I think we stop ourselves from doing things sometimes because we are afraid because of the money challenges.
Right.
We might teach at a studio that we don't completely believe in because it pays us well, and we're afraid to go out on our own and create our new adventures or our new endeavors, whatever they are, our new companies or a new business because we worry about money. So I think to make yoga accessible, we do need to do that. We need to be more creative and be willing to try new things and to go and bring yoga to that place. And I would say in accessible yoga, there's different avenues for getting paid. Especially if yoga is, when I say accessible yoga, I often think of yoga as service, but that doesn't mean not getting paid. It actually just means maybe finding different income sources, like working for community-based organizations, bringing yoga to the people they are serving, or getting grants for yoga teaching, which there are very few of, but they do exist. And I think there's a lot more coming, actually. So I do think there's money out there for this work, but you have to maybe think a little differently. So do you know what I'm saying? Like just teaching at the studio is not necessarily making yoga accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you bring this in because we're often thinking, well, I want everyone to be able to have yoga, no matter if what their income, or maybe they don't even have an income. And you're right, someone needs to pay that teacher. Otherwise, it's just not sustainable. So
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
right. We
Teaching
need
for
to get
free. Yeah. Teaching for free is not the answer to me.
no.
No.
No. And people don't value it the same. Like
No.
somebody needs to be valuing you as a yoga teacher and valuing your time.
Yeah.
All around, it builds so what I was thinking that you were saying is that when we start to think about our money situation, it will make yoga more accessible in that, and this is my own work. I've constantly had to work on money mindset. But if I can market my yoga, it actually makes it more accessible. And if I stick around as a yoga teacher instead of going out of business and getting a job somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good point. Good point.
I am super excited about your book. Is there anything that you feel like came up while you were creating this, writing this, where you thought you learned something new or something that was challenging or that
Oh
you're
God.
excited to bring to the
Oh,
yoga
it's the
teachers?
hardest thing. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. I mean, I think writing a book is, well, I mean, writing in general, I've come to love over the last few years, especially. I think of it as a great teaching format. So I like these days I'm not teaching regular open classes anymore. I'm mostly doing trainings and writing this book, and now I speak a lot, and I feel like writing is another tool for teaching yoga, and I have to really get my mind around that for writing the book, because I really did get into this, like, insecurity and what is that, imposter syndrome stuff, like just really doubting
Right.
myself, like who are you to write this book, and
I love that you had that. Who are you? Like, you have this huge organization. You have over 25 years of teaching experience and you still had it.
oh yeah, I mean, it's everyone has it. I've never met anyone who doesn't have it. I mean, it's just human. But that's what yoga teaches us about that, actually. It's the way the mind works, and the ego.
Right.
And I love that we have those teachings in yoga. The ego, in the sutras, there's a beautiful part that basically describes the ego as the misidentification of spirit with body mind. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
So
no, I don't. I would love for you to explain it to me. I feel like it went right over my head. I
yeah,
heard the word.
okay. Well, I can just say it again, that basically ego, because we use the word ego a lot, but I feel like what it says so beautifully in the sutras is that ego is the misidentification of spirit. Like we mistakenly think of who we are, not as spirit, but instead as our body and mind.
Okay.
So we've identified with the
Yes.
body and mind. That's who we are, rather than identify as spirit. And so ego is that mistake that we've made, identifying with body mind instead of the spirit that's underneath it. And it's not that the body mind isn't real, it's just that the spirit is underlying it. It's truth that's, unaffected by what's happening in our lives. And
Right. Like as we
yeah.
age or as we,
Yes,
right.
exactly.
Right.
Like that's that's the example I always give actually, is as you age. Now it's like, are you the same person you were when you were 2 years old or 12 or 21? Like, are you the same? What part of you is the same? What part of you is different? And the part of you that's the same, that underlying essence of that I-ness, that's spirit, or what I would call spirit, or whatever you can call whatever
Mhm.
you want. And it's just ego is what's changing, body, mind is changing over time. Anyway, that was related somehow to this. So of course everyone has this imposter syndrome because it's this tension between this truth of who you are, spirit, and who you have identified as, ego, body,
Ah,
mind.
right.
So it's the nature of the mind, I believe, to be insecure and to either puff itself up as the best or to put itself down as the worst. And I would say that's been a big lesson for me. I'm actually I'm an introvert and a shy person, and I've had to learn that that's also ego, and that putting myself out there, and that's what I say, like around the imposter syndrome stuff, putting myself out there is a way of addressing ego, right? Like shyness is ego too.
Yeah. This is interesting. I never thought of introvert shyness as being part of ego. We always think it's like you said, puffing up, like, look at me.
Yeah.
We always think that's ego.
No, it's putting
Oh,
yourself down and thinking you're not worthy, that you're nothing, and it's neither one are true. It's the other side of the same coin, right? Like the truth is that we all have something important to do here. We all have, our spirits are equal. There's no differentiation made, at least within yoga tradition, between the spirit of any two people. Not one is not better than another. It doesn't matter.
yeah.
Actually, same with your body. Like it doesn't matter what your body's ability is. If you have a disability or chronic illness, that doesn't change that the fact that your spirit, your essence, is equal to that of someone else.
Yeah.
Which is why yoga is so beautiful. It's this great equalizer, to me, right?
Hmm.
And going back to what we originally started with, talking about how yoga is so different than Western thinking. This is it, actually. This is probably the way that this is what I was thinking of earlier, that yoga is inwardly focused and basically shows us that we have an essential intrinsic value. And Western culture is the opposite. It's externally focused and it bases our value on external factors.
Oh,
And
yes.
unfortunately, I think that yoga has been co-opted by Western culture to begin valuing those external factors like flexibility and physical strength and things like that. Thin bodies that can do certain things are valued more, especially white bodies. It's really, I mean, it's the way that Western culture and capitalism have worked. And to be honest, white supremacy, even you could say, is based in that
Mhm.
valuing of certain bodies over other bodies. And I think that is not what yoga does. Yoga is the opposite. Yoga is saying we all have this same essential value, and we all have a place, and we're all important. And so yoga to me is very revolutionary, actually, in that way. And I think that's what I try to get to with the work of accessible yoga, is say that it's not, your value is not on the performance that you do in the yoga class. Your value is in how connected can you be with yourself. I mean, that's not even your value. Your value is intrinsic. You don't have to do anything.
Right.
But,
Right.
But that's not what yoga is doing.
The competitiveness in me was just like, how could I be more connected than the person beside me?
I was misleading you there. No, but you know what I mean, right? It's like you have an intrinsic value. You don't have to do anything to have that value.
But I get what you're saying, and it's crazy to me how my mind wanted to latch onto that and think,
yeah,
how could I do that better?
Yeah, you don't have to do anything, actually. You don't have to do anything to be of more value. But what you can do is you can appreciate yourself and take care of yourself and acknowledge yourself, not in an egotistical way, but in a kind of centered way, right? Like I am worthy, I am full, I am complete, and I don't have to do something or be something for someone else or look a certain way or do a certain thing to get value. Right.
Yeah. And you're right. It's in tiny pockets of moments in yoga practice where that starts to come in for me anyway.
Yes.
Maybe sitting outside, like little tiny moments.
Like being in nature, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. There's so many ways that we have that experience in our lives. I think it can happen. Yeah, like nature is one of the best. I think there are a lot of activities that we do, like creative activities, actually, that cultivate that space. I often call it like being in a meditative flow, and it can happen naturally if you're doing an activity you enjoy. Like if you like to run, or if you like to cook, or like surfing, like whatever it is, the activity that you enjoy, that probably is a place where you can get to that space of kind of ego-less presence. And the reason that's important to notice is that yoga is literally designed to create or cultivate that experience. And so that's why I say that yoga is so powerful, and I think so important for all of us. I mean, anyone who's interested, I don't want to make everyone do yoga, but anyone who's interested, because these practices are literally created for that point, for that purpose. Rather than just hope that, some activity will bring you that joy, yoga is actually designed to cultivate that experience for us. And what is more incredible than that? Like, that's just amazing.
You're right. That is amazing. Thank you so much for all of this. I feel like this went above and beyond any of my expectations. And I'm sitting here like with many more thoughts. And it's just been a real joy to talk to you. So thank you.
And you too. You know what? I love this conversation because you didn't make me go back and tell my whole story again. I often get interviewed, and it's like, okay, go back to the beginning, and then the next thing, and the next thing. And I think, okay, that's fine once. But like, you know what? After a while, it's more fun to just talk. And you gave me that freedom. So I hope it was useful. And and for anyone listening, I mean, these are just some thoughts I have. I mean, I think what I always suggest to people is to go back to the source, like to start reading the scriptures of yoga if you're not already doing it on a regular basis. Like that is the most important part of my practice, is go back to those teachings. And it creates a context for what we're doing. I mean, if you're a yoga practitioner, right? I mean, if you're not doing yoga, you don't have to read those scriptures. But if you're a yoga practitioner, go back to the source. That's actually accessible to us. Like you can find hundreds of translations of the Yoga Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita, and you can find one you like. Like if you don't like that one, find another one, and it's so amazing. It's so incredible what's there, the way that those teachings show us how to practice yoga and what yoga is. And I feel like that's so often lost these days, right? Just going back to the source. We don't go back to the source.
That's so true. If people want to find out about your book or your trainings, is there one website that is the best one for them to go to? Would it be accessibleyoga.org?
Yeah, that's probably the best one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have your links to Facebook and Instagram. And I want other people to check out your social media and how it's going with someone. They can use it as an
Yeah.
example. It's
Yeah.
such a good example. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
I
you
appreciate
so
that.
much for your time today.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your incredible work. Really, it's so important. Thanks for connecting all of us.
Thank you. Well, connected yoga teachers, do you see what I mean when you listen to Jivana? Thank you so much for all that you shared in this episode, Jivana. It really is one that I can go back to and listen to over and over again and kind of get one more piece of information from it. And it's soothing to me as a yoga teacher. I don't really know how else to explain it. This idea of how it's soothing to me as a yoga teacher, I'm sitting here wondering, why is that? Is it because Jivana is living his yoga? Is it because he is a longtime yoga teacher? Connected yoga teachers, I would love to hear from you on this. If you have some idea, maybe there's an episode that you listen to and it just feels really soothing to you and your nervous system, your body, and your mind. What's also interesting about this episode to me is that there isn't really the usual call to action or step 1, step 2, which often does happen in this podcast. And that's because I love to give people the next actionable step. So I'm wondering if we could make today's actionable step just this reflection. Can we look at what does accessible yoga mean to us as a yoga teacher? Is there something that is really inspiring you from today's call that you are going to bring into your yoga business or your yoga classes or your own yoga practice? I would love to hear from you in the show notes. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/138, you can see the show notes there. And at the bottom, you can leave a comment. If you would rather leave me a voicemail, I love voicemails. There's a place to do that on our website. Go to theconnectedyogateacher.com and you'll see this button over on the right-hand side. It will allow you to send an audio clip to me, and I respond to each and every one of them with an audio clip back. If you are wanting to work with me one-on-one in a consultation call, go to theconnectedyogateacher.com and look under Work with Shannon, and you'll see everything you need to do there. There's an application form and a way to book through Schedulicity. Next week on the podcast, Connected Yoga Teachers, we get to hear from Tarzan K., who, if you ever have listened to Amy Porterfield's podcast, works with Amy Porterfield. Tarzan was on Amy Porterfield's podcast. I reached out to her because she's a fellow Canadian and she is very gifted at helping people to send out amazing emails and to write amazing copy. So if you've been wondering at all, how do I write my emails? What do I say in them? How do I get inspired? How often do I write them? Or even we got into talking about money and how to raise your rates as a yoga teacher. You are going to want to tune in to next week's episode. Take care, connected yoga teachers. Stay connected to yourself, to your practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.